Dr. Neeta Bhushan is a former cosmetic dentist turned international speaker, emotional intelligence advocate, leadership coach, founder of the Global Grit Institute, and best-selling author of Emotional Grit. She actually left her $1 million dentistry practice to pursue her inner truth, a journey where she spent over 15 years across 45 countries researching and immersing herself in the field of human behavior. She has an incredible personal journey through navigating death multiple times, cancer, domestic violence, and divorce. She really has overcome some extraordinary adversity, and her story is so inspirational. It will move you to your core, and she's about to share very vulnerably on this episode. So get ready to listen to a powerful, deep conversation with the lovely, beautiful Dr. Neeta Bhushan. Neeta, I am so excited to have you on the show today.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you
Ashley,
for being here.
So amazing. I'm just so honored. I'm so excited and just ready to dive in.
Me too. And I know this is going to be really powerful for a lot of people who we're going to talk about emotions. We're going to talk about overcoming adversity. And these are all things that you teach, that you've written about in your book. So I'm just really excited for our listeners to experience you and you've got just such a beautiful energy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think we're like mirrors, we attract like minds. So it's so good to serve.
Yeah. And before we do dive into all that, I love, because I know we haven't talked about this together yet, but I did a little research.
Okay.
And I know you have a really interesting backstory, and you have overcome some adversity in your life. I would love for you to share your journey with our listeners.
Yeah. So, oh, wow. So we'll have to go back. I was born and raised in Chicago to immigrant parents, and my mom was from the Philippines. My father was from India. And so growing up in Chicago, first generation, I was the oldest of three siblings. So I was the oldest of three, and two younger brothers. And it was very much instilled, and you could probably relate to this, like very much instilled from an Asian background, cultural background, that, success is everything, because, they were both from very much pride-driven, legacy-driven, honor-driven families. And so that was really what I grew up with. And so things kind of shifted in our life, and I had to grow up really early. And so at 10 years old, I found myself being the caretaker of my mother, who had got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so that was a really big blow for my parents, simply because they were just doing the best that they could. They came to Chicago for a bigger life, a better life. They were from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different religious backgrounds. So I remember, we were young and my mom was Catholic, my father was Hindu, but he was mostly like very spiritual. And so we would go to church on Sundays, temple on Tuesdays, and just like we were in the melting pot of Chicago. But things changed because she got sick, and we weren't really having that normal childhood. I spent many of my days literally growing up in the hospital setting, because from 10 years old to 16, that was, the prime years of your youth, like as a child, growing into a teenager. And I was in the hospital, in and out, just taking care of her. And so she battled with that for 6 years. And then her journey, she transitioned when I was 16. And so, so that was like the initial point of resilience for me, of like, okay, taking on the motherly responsibilities, helping out my father at home, with the household chores, with cooking, with cleaning. And he was a very traditional Indian father. I still had to come home and bring home the straight A's, and you're still, expected to dance and karaoke and all of those things, because that's what Asians do, right? And so, and then a year immediately after my mom died, my brother, who was 16 months younger than me, he was leaving school. He was a sophomore in high school, and we were meeting because we had a homecoming game that we were meeting for. And he suddenly collapsed. He had asthma, and he didn't have his inhaler. And they tried to revive him. The ambulance was called, and so we lost him a year after my mom passed away. So that was like...
What was that experience like for you? Like, I mean, you were how young at this time?
I was a senior in high school, and I remember I was, it was like the last homecoming game, and my brother was gonna come meet us. Like, we were so close, Yeah. And it was just like your world is completely torn from under you, because not only are you going through, just the grieving process of losing your mom, and it's such a strange time because...
And also trying to hold it together for
the family. So you're kind of like this pillar of trying to be this strength for everybody around you, but then also it's almost like your first best friend, leaves, and there's just, they don't say goodbye, they don't say anything. And that was just so visceral.
How did you work through that? Like, what do you feel was pivotal for you in of course, honoring your own process and moving through it in a healthy way? Or did you move through it in a healthy way? Could you share on that?
Yeah, I look back at that, and because I could have gone both ways. I could have definitely gone, all right, total victim mindset, and just said, look at me, this, and just so angry and mad at life.
Or like numbing out.
And completely numbing out with drugs. I mean, I was a teenager. That's like prime time to, get pregnant early, to just not care about anything, because I had all of the excuses in the world. I had just lost my mom. I lost my brother. And then, and he died on my youngest brother's birthday, on his 12th birthday. So it was just like so... like the magnitude and the scale for that was just like, whoa. And then you see my father just going into a deep depression at that point. And so you have all of these things. And for me, it was like I had to, I didn't have a choice. And it was almost like I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And the light at the end of the tunnel was, I don't want anybody to feel bad for us. I don't want anybody to pity us. So because of that, it was almost like this innate chip on your shoulder, where I was just running through that tunnel. Did I process it fine at that point? That was like my innate living skills, like the life skills of like, I have to just get through this point. And so what I did was, throughout, and this kind of veered into my 20s as well, because I had a therapist. We'd been going to therapy since I was 15, 16, around when my mom was transitioning, and then losing my brother was just like so heavy. But it was the initial therapy because I was from the Midwest, everything was success oriented, education oriented. I had no idea about self-help or healing, of course, at that time.
Yeah.
So the only thing I knew was faith. We were going to everything from church and, temples to, my father was, we would go to a Gurdwara, which is the Sikh temple as well, because that's where he was born. He was born in a part of Punjab in India where they, celebrated all the customs and all the traditions from different religious faiths. So we were heavy into faith at that time, which is really what helped. And the other thing was just a really strong community. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have our aunts coming in and people just, pouring out and pouring in their love, I don't know how I would be sitting here and standing here talking to you today. So that was just one of the initial points of like, okay, I have two choices. I can not do anything, not take action, numb everything, or I can go the opposite route. And for me, it was like working incessantly hard for overachieving, success, that drive. And, and then of course it would affect me, later on in the journey. And I'm sure it'll, unravel in this conversation, but yeah.
So I actually I love that you're speaking on this, because I just shared, I might get emotional. I just shared I was speaking at a event in Florida, and they asked me what my biggest fear is. And I said, my biggest fear is losing someone close to me, like someone that, like my parents or my brother or someone at that level of closeness to me. That's what I fear the most, because I haven't experienced that. I have friends in my life who have, I have, but I've never experienced that. And so I've also gotten questions from my audience asking, how do I grieve a loss? How do I deal with that? So I mean, for me, I love that you're speaking on this, because it's speaking into my fear, and my heart just feels for you so much. And, yeah, so thank you for speaking on this. And honestly, this has been something that I've been actually asked as a podcast topic.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was one of the requests that I got before I launched. So.
Oh, wow. Well, well, here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. Yeah, it's because it's such a big topic that I don't think, we either we sensationalize death, and there's different aspects of death that we don't really talk about. It's, in the grieving process for that, either we distract it and don't talk about it at all, or, there are some cultures that actually celebrate that. And while, they were tragedies, because I didn't even, I didn't even finish, but 2 years after my brother passed away, my father was diagnosed with lung cancer. And this is like, whoa, really?
Wow.
Really, universe? It's like, okay, when you thought everything was done, when you thought everything was over with, when I thought that, the same doctors that treated my mom were the ones giving us the news. And it was the news that, like, yeah, we found a tumor. Yeah, it's in his lungs and we can't operate on it. And he has 7 months to live.
Were you frustrated? Like, what was that when they told you that? What did you feel in that moment? Like, I'm trying to even imagine.
I was angry.
That's what I was going to
so
say.
angry.
I feel like frustrated, angry.
Yeah, it was all of those, because, with grief, you have a lot of those, the tense emotions of, you go through the different stages, right? There's 7 stages of grief. And, acceptance was a little bit later for me, because it just kept on going, from when I was 10, mentally getting prepared, all the way through when I lost my dad when I was 19. So, 7 months later, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was so angry. I was so angry at the doctors, because they became, our family friends, and we just didn't believe that. We didn't believe it at all. My father didn't even, he was in disbelief. He was in such shock, because he knew, he was like, okay, it's going to be time. And so he knew in his heart that he was going to leave a 14-year-old. And I was then, 19 when he eventually passed. But, it's tough, because now I'm a parent as well now. So it's like, oh my gosh. And yeah, for a while I was so angry, and I didn't want to believe it. But then of course, as you go through the process of grief, there's a sort of acceptance. And since we had gone through it with our mom, and then spontaneously with our brother, it was just like, it made our family so much closer. Even though...
And it could go either way with that. I've heard it tearing families apart. I mean, that's what... So my dad's brother died when he was 18.
Yeah.
And it just was like collapse after that.
Yeah.
Because it was hard for them to deal with it. They didn't know how. What do you think it was that brought you guys... How did you guys deal with it in a way that brought you guys closer together?
Yeah, it was, when times just got so dark for us, all we could do was laugh. All we could do was just just really pay attention to the small things that were just, you know, even the flowers in the garden that were blooming, like just some of the smallest sense that would just give us grace in the moment and give us peace in the moment, because you just didn't know. Things were so uncertain. So you just didn't know. And so, some of the petty things just didn't really matter because we had such life things to deal with. Mm-hmm. And, for so many people listening and going through a tough time, a tough phase, a tough transition, it is life. And those things will happen. It's just a matter of when. And when you're faced with, the stuff that could really stir up in your soul, how do you rise from it? And how do you give yourself the opportunity to see, okay, what is it that we can learn or become even better as a result? And for me, it was so much faith at the time. I think at that point I was like an evangelical Christian. Like that was the only community that would, that were just celebrating life in that way, but also that was just our community. We lived in the city of Chicago. It was a melting pot. Our family and friends came together. I mean, people from all different faiths were just like,
wow.
Just giving us so much love and so much help. And to be able to receive that.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Because so many people are like, no. They think it's a burden. Mm-hmm. And for my dad, him having the ego that he did and the pride and just the stoicism of, this masculine archetype that he had, it was just like, yes, I need help. Yes, take my kids to church, take them to wherever, because they need that hope. And that really informed us.
And that's the thing, is people, when they're in that position, whether it be any kind of traumatic event they're going through, they feel like that's the first initial thing is maybe I'm being selfish, like it feels selfish, but it's actually your father doing that was the most selfless thing that he could have done.
Absolutely.
Receiving is a selfless thing, and a lot of people have that so backwards. And so for you, when you had, like, I can tell every time you bring up community and how your faith and community, you're
oh, absolutely.
And that was my question too, because I feel like, I mean, again, I've never experienced it, so I can't speak on it from a direct stance, but a part of me would want to hide. Mm-hmm. Did you feel that, where you wanted to hide and not see anyone? Or did you just, what was that?
So it's interesting now because, community is such a big aspect of so many of the things that we do. And I think it's totally because of, losing 3 members of your immediate family will definitely put you into drive of like, humans are so important. And I'm going to hold on to these relationships, and I'm going to hold on to relationships that are good for me, but also relationships that may not be the best for me, which of course it affected me in my love life and my love relationships. Absolutely. But it was one of the things that really kept me going and kept me healing, because I was able to cultivate such strong community. I mean, even as a teenager, in every single phase of my life, young adulthood, in my early 20s, like in the different seasons of whatever I was doing, that has always been a stronghold, and it still is.
And now and what's so cool is now you're creating that.
Yeah.
You're creating that in everything that you're doing now.
Absolutely.
That's
absolutely.
Beautiful.
I mean,
yeah, you really are.
I'm like, that's exactly what I do. And I do love connecting and bringing people together.
You've experienced the profound power of that, and you're bringing it everywhere, which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, by the way, for those of you listening, and I'll put it in the show notes as well, Neeta has written a book called Emotional Grit.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk about this, and this is really directly correlated to what we've been talking about. When you go through these emotional, traumatic events, and and it's not even about comparison. Like for those of you listening, whatever you're going through in your life, there's no like, oh, mine's not as bad as, hers or his. Let that go.
Right.
Let that go right now.
There's no comparison because it could affect you at any stage, and even the smallest situation could be the biggest thing for somebody, and that's what we honor, and we respect that, and that's okay because it's part of the journey.
Yeah, and it takes, so for me, grit, and I want to hear your definition of grit and how you look at it. I know you use it as an acronym too,
I do
right?
use it as an acronym, yeah.
For me, I think of grit as like courage, an emotional grit, because I feel like sometimes grit, when they first hear it, might be seemed as like grit, like gritting your teeth and not feel like just powering through, but really that's not it at all. It's like, it's actually being courageous enough to feel, to heal and like move through it. So like even you talking about it, bringing light to it, what you went through, that's a courageous act. And that for me is grit, but I would love to hear what it is to you.
Yeah. So, so in the book, we basically take people through the stages because, grit as an acronym is to grow, reveal, innovate, and transform. And so, the missing piece of what we have in society right now, and even within our own relationships, within ourselves, what's that driving force is really emotional intelligence. And that was really the missing piece of everything that, I was doing. I was, trained as a dental professional, and then being, kind of transitioning from that life, transitioning from that chapter. What I realized as a result of every single aspect of, the phases of life that I was going through, from, the losses, the tragedy, and then going through a path of healing, really putting together the pieces was, the aspect to be able to first be open to growth. It is number one. If we are not open to growing, like you asked me, how were you at 15 or 16? If I was just, going to be sulking or just staying in that victim mindset, I would never be able to be open to the angels that were coming down, the guides that were coming down, the mentors that were coming down. So we have to be open to growing first. Then we can accept, which is part of the grieving process, but accept even where we're at, even where, your listeners are at right now today. Accept where you are at, because then you can reveal what's next on the journey. And then, of course, it will help us to innovate and change by then taking action or transforming. So, but the true definition of grit that I actually teach is the tenacity to keep going even when times are tough. And we can always do that through grace, which is what I love that you connected it with courage, because courage is one of the 11 characteristics that when I was actually researching, because I'm a science brainiac, and that was, of course, part of my last life. But when this was out and I was researching, there was 11 characteristics that were voted on, and courage, of course, was one of them. But grit and resilience were the top two of characteristics of successful people in all walks of life, like what actually contributed to their success in life as well as in their business, which was having the tenacity to keep going, even when things are just either chaotic in your life or out of control. How can you keep on going as a result and holding on, to rise and bloom?
So, yeah, and it's a courageous growth in itself. That first step, growth, is courageous, because growth, as we all know, is freaking uncomfortable. Okay,
it's hard. It's hard.
It's not a comfortable path to take. But but most of the time, these things that we fear about growth, these uncomfortable situations, they always appear way more uncomfortable than they end up being.
Yeah.
And so it takes courage to face those moments of growth. And experience the growing pains.
Yep.
Because some of us will just shudder at that, you
Totally.
know? And so what have you found through your research and just through everything that is the number one things that hold people back from rising?
So good. It's their own fear. It's their own fear of, I talk about 3 fear cultures, and we all have, these 3 fear cultures that are either embedded in us from our programming, from our upbringing, from our environment, from our families. And it's, the fear that I am not enough, or fear of worthiness, so lack of worthiness. I am not enough. Therefore, I'm going to continuously prove to the world by overcompensating everything in my life because I'm not enough. There is not enough. There is not enough in the world.
Like scarcity.
Yes.
Got it.
Fear of scarcity. There is not enough because there is not enough, I'm going to be competitive. I'm not going to share things with you. I'm going to withhold things from you. I'm not going to be collaborative because I'm afraid that there's not enough in the world to go around. And we see that. We see that as people's fear. And then the other fear is, this is not enough. What I'm doing, this is not enough. So fear of aversion, meaning that whatever we're doing, and this was very visceral for me, because whatever I was doing, whether it was the books or my cosmetic dental practice, the real estate that I got into, the nonprofit that I started, it was never going to be enough. And this happens a lot with entrepreneurs and with leaders. That, okay, what you're doing is not enough. Therefore,
it's like the never-ending climb. Like there's never the
Right.
top of the mountain inside.
Right.
It just keeps going and going.
Right.
And wanting to experience that enoughness, if you will.
It's the enoughness.
But then in that last one, what did you say? It is not enough.
This is not
This
enough.
is not enough. This is not enough would be every time that you're, I'll be happy when.
Right.
I'll be happy when I get this.
Yep.
I'll make it when. It's like I call it like the one size syndrome. Like once I get this, then I'll
one
be
side.
happy.
Yeah.
One
Right.
side.
Once I get married. Yeah. Once I have my kid. Once I have number 2.
Like conditional living. It's conditional living.
So, yeah. So true.
And then, so let's cover those again. And for those of you, I hope you're taking notes, listeners.
Take notes.
So the first one, I am not enough.
I am not enough.
Second is
there is not enough. Culture of scarcity, right? There is not enough. And culture of aversion, this is not enough. This is not enough. Therefore, I'm going to keep working and working and working and working.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, screenshot this. Let us know where you are and tag us, because it's interesting to know. Like I feel like I experience when you were describing him, the one that really landed the most was the second one, the scarcity. So I was brought up in it's really interesting. 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. My dad's like Mr. Abundance. Money grows on trees. And my mom's sitting there like, your dad just thinks money grows on trees. Like, what's wrong with him? So it was very 2 ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
My grandma Yoko, she lives in Tokyo.
Yeah, Tokyo.
She is a real life actual hoarder.
Oh
like she
my
actually
God.
I wouldn't, you have to walk sideways to walk through her place.
That's the Asian genes.
Yeah. And it's stacked to the ceilings.
Yeah. Why do they do that?
I wouldn't go in. I'm like, you go get your thing. I'll stand out here. I'm not going in there.
Oh my gosh.
But the thing is it's transferred a little. It gets like diluted each generation. Each generation.
Yeah.
But that one for me, what it comes down to at the root of that for me is safety. It's like I have that because it's.
I have to protect.
I gotta hold on to it, because if I don't, I won't be safe. So I resonate with that one the most. And for those of you listening, I'd love to know whether it's a DM if you don't feel comfortable sharing it publicly. But remember, courage is shining light on the darkness.
That's so true. So true.
So share it.
We're calling you out.
Yes,
in a supportive space, right?
But I love that, because you're bringing awareness to these patterns, cultures.
Yeah, patterns.
And, so for people, what's the next step once they've like identified, okay, like for example, me, I have this, scarcity thing going on. That's my underlying, it rears its head, in situations.
dude.
Yeah. So what's the process you take people through once they've identified?
Yeah. So the first step is obviously to have the awareness, because if we don't have the awareness, then we're just going to be oblivious. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to still keep poking its head.
Yeah. We can't fix what we don't know exists.
Right. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so once we actually understand that that is something that's really, really been a trigger or a through line in your life up until this point, then we can actually start to make different changes and subtle changes. We can start to accept, oh, if I'm triggered here, or if I'm triggered in business, or if I meet somebody that this idea of scarcity comes up, oh, okay, I know what that is now. I understand what that is. I get where that's coming from. Oh, yep, I'm doing that thing again. Oh, we're having that conversation again. And of course, it's always going to come up with people that can tend to trigger you the most, like family, really close friends, love relationships, right?
Oh, those are the ones. Those are the deepest. That's the most intimate. Yeah, the most intimate ones.
Right.
Show you. They're like mirrors.
Absolutely. And that's where then you can, from that lens, we can then start to build in certain things. So once we are aware, so first it's the awareness, but then we have to then accept. Then we're okay to accept, okay, this is what I keep doing. So how do I then change that?
Not push it away.
And not, shove it under a rug.
Because I want to, before you move on, because that's important. You're embracing it. You're accepting it. Not resisting, not pushing. What you resist persists.
Yes.
So don't do that, because you're not going to overcome it if you're resisting it.
It's just going to keep coming up. It's going to keep popping up.
It'll actually build, because that's secrecy. Secrecy breeds shame. More dark. So you're piling darkness on darkness at that point. So it's compounding. Okay, so we know, embrace it.
So good.
And then keep going, girl.
And then from there, we can start to make decisions. We can then ask ourselves from a third person, okay, Ashley, is this really serving me right now? If I'm going to act like that, if I'm going to withhold stuff, if I'm going to start hoarding things, how is that really serving me in relationship? Or if it's coming up in your own personal relationship or colleagues or business, how are those things popping up where then you can say, you know what? I'm actually going to make a different decision because of this. I'm not going to do what I normally do. I'm not going to shun away the conversation because I'm afraid to confront somebody. I'm not going to, talk about what is so fearing for me because I'm afraid to share and be judged by the people that love me the most. I'm going to do it anyways. So it really tests your courage, because then you're able to do something different, meaning start to reveal, start to innovate, start to change the behavior, because once you've recognized there's the pattern that you want to break, that's where we start to form, if we're going to go science, but new pathways in your brain of trying something new, of doing something new, of instead of shying away from something, actually accepting something and saying, you know what, that feels uncomfortable, but I'm going to do that anyways.
Leaning into it.
Lean all the way in.
Yeah. I love that. I want to share, I feel like you'll like this.
Yeah.
So and for those of you listening, if mine was number 2, so whatever yours is, you can apply this in your own way. When I realized that I had this underlying scarcity, so I did a transformational 4-month journey of 3 years ago, or whatever it was now. And I realized my scarcity thing going on underneath, and that I would be I was showing up selfish, but it was because the underlying thing for me was, I was scared. I wanted to stay safe, so I would, protect my things, not sharing, Well, I challenged myself to start doing little incremental things that felt super uncomfortable and challenged that part of me, because I realized it was there. Well, I went out and I got my nails done with 5 girlfriends, and we all got manicures, pedicures.
Yep.
And I was sitting there and I was the first one done.
Okay.
So I'm the first one done, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm kind of waiting for the other girls, and I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do. okay, let me get out my credit card. I'm paying for everyone today.
Oh my
Girl,
gosh.
I'll never forget. And by the way, this was like, this
Yes.
wasn't the first thing I did. This was like probably the biggest, like this one moment sticks out to me because I
Right.
remember the feeling handing over my credit card. All the safety triggers are being triggered inside of me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God, this is money I'm losing.
Right. Losing.
Right.
Yeah.
Losing. So
Yeah.
that's the mindset I was in.
Yeah.
And I'm handing it over. That was a pivotal moment for me. I leaned into that discomfort, and I really believe that was it. And for those of you listening, these are steps that you can take. I mean, that's an example, but it felt uncomfortable. And you know what? It grew me massively. Just that one paying for manis and petties. I mean, who would have thought?
I love it. I love it because it's kind of like, it was so uncomfortable, but you're aware that it's uncomfortable and you did it anyways. Because the other side of that was, I mean, how'd you feel?
Yeah.
Your girlfriends were like,
well, they were they were like, what? They were like so confused. And I'm like, I felt super uncomfortable initially. So that's the thing is you will feel the discomfort. Don't think that you're not gonna.
Right.
But then once I did it, it was crazy. I felt just like, wow, okay, that wasn't so bad. I'm still safe. Because then you realize you're like, this thing that I fear, because the deep down fear, whatever that, for me, it's the safety thing. I'm like, well, I'm all good. Nothing happened. I'm still alive.
I still have money.
yeah. And I felt really abundant in that moment.
Of course.
That's the identity I wanted to be. I want to be that. I wanted to be that girl. So I wanted to make decisions from that space. From, if I was abundant, what would I do in this position?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, so good. So good.
I love it. So what, okay. This is like, so I know, I feel like we're just jamming out right now. But
we totally are. I love it.
Okay. we are coming towards the end, but we do have a little bit of time. So Neeta, we definitely went in a whole trajectory that I wasn't anticipating, but it's perfect because we're
so
flowing.
Good. Yeah. So good.
With this whole, creating a space for yourself to move through emotions in your life, to master your emotions, what is something else that you found to be pivotal in this process of mastering your emotions, of coming through on the other side that we haven't talked about yet? Is there anything else that...
Yeah, so I really think that, if you are going through, we're actually working on this incredible course that's really all about all of the things that we're doing. So I just filmed last week. So everything's like super fresh in my head because of the same reasons. Like our audience was like, when are we going to dive deeper into this? The book is it was just kind of a launch pad and really kind of like the opening of like, what is it that people really want and people really need in their life? And so, I talk about this where, I think we already mentioned community is a huge aspect of whether you're going through something really traumatic or a season in life, maybe you're, a bout of depression, any sort of struggle or challenge. Community is always that, because if we don't have the right community, of course, the different emotions, the toxicity of certain people, certain energies, the ability to be able to then create boundaries as a result, it all stems from having the right community in place. But also, like, how are you checking in? Are you checking in with your emotional health weekly, daily? Do you have, self-care rituals, regimens that you are doing for yourself? Are you actually allowing yourself to, and I know I can bullet point these and, we could put it in show notes for you and for your audience, but are you actually taking the time to joke around and laugh at yourself? I talk about when I'm teaching resilience and grit, but resilience, the ability to bounce back from tough times, is, are you able to laugh? Can you laugh? It's one of the reasons why in the early days, I actually took a stand-up comedy I took last year, but I took an improv class 7 years ago. And 7 years ago when I was, on the brink of leaving my first marriage. I was married for a short time. And because I had really minimized myself in that relationship where I had no voice. I was codependent. I didn't want to lose that person. I didn't know who I was. And, but, I knew that I was like, I need to do something that is going to completely be the opposite of me constantly trying to, achieve. And the high achiever in me, where things were always so serious, because in my life, obviously, as everybody knows now, there was a lot of seriousness in the life. Like we needed to lighten the load a little bit. But at that point in my life, when I was in a really tough spot, in a relationship per se, like in a love relationship, I was like, I need to do something different. And what scared me the most was getting in front of people and doing things that were not smart, which in my opinion was, just being able to have fun, which was improv classes. And it scared the heck out of me. Like I think almost peeing in my pants, scared, like,
heart racing,
like everything, because not only do you have to be super present. I don't know if you've ever taken an improv class
before.
before.
I feel like now I want to.
It's amazing. And that really built not only my courage to actually leave the relationship.
Wow.
It was one of the things that really gave me the awareness of like, this is like I'm getting respect from these other people here, and this is just not what I need to be doing in my relationship. So being able to laugh at yourself, being able to not take yourself so seriously, could also open up doors to other things that you're trying to close them. You're trying to hide.
And something I feel like you did there, Neeta, is you weren't, like you said, you were shrinking, you weren't using your voice, you felt sort of powerless in the relationship. Well, you went and did something that actually had you feeling powerful, had you feeling present in your body, had you using your voice, had you not hiding, because you're obviously on stage and you can't hide on stage. So you literally were doing the thing. And so for those of you listening, there's a lot in that. Like there's so much there. So you got to feel your power again.
I got to feel.
And once you felt it, you're like,
feel again.
This is where I get to be everywhere in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that was really the stepping stone of like, okay, not just healing, but also confidence and the power that was really missing for a good part of my 20s. So much so that even, last year, to test myself again and to really challenge myself, I was like, okay, what scares me the most? Oh yeah, that's stand-up comedy. So, being able to write, because at this point I've been speaking on stages, I've been speaking really motivationally speaking, about my story and really helping build emotional health. And so this was a very different tangent of like, I want to challenge myself, but I want to challenge myself in a way where, again, it's building that other layer of, can you actually let your guard down? Because you guys, it's all a journey, and there's an onion unraveling, and really showing you more of who you want to be and who you really are, at your core. Yeah. So, and for me, it was, all right, stand-up comedy, sure, I'll sign up for it. And again, it was those triggering feelings of the, and this was different because this time you had and we're in LA now. I'm not in Chicago, I'm in LA. And so you have real comedians who are in the audience, who are also, they build your grit and your resilience because you have hecklers there, and it's just a whole different. You're
inspiring me, girl.
If you guys really want to get out of your comfort level, boy, take a comedy class.
That's the real challenge of this episode, you know.
It's the real challenge. Because if you're afraid of judgment, if you're afraid of any of those things, it tests you. But I had the most fun. And now, of course, I bring a lot of that into our, live events, speaking, and just really who I am and always wanted to be at my core, because really it goes down to healing that little girl, and that little girl just wanted to play. And that little girl just, she just wanted to be.
Yeah.
And she had, stacked on pile after pile after pile of just stuff and life. And so it's just so cool to be able to have that foundation to play. So much so that last year I started this series. It was called School of Grit, and it was just for fun. And you guys can check it out. But we did 3 seasons, but it was all just it was a video series.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and just no agenda, but really for me to play around with what I learned.
I had one of my friends ask this question to me, who is actually a healer, and he speaks all over the world. He said, he's Italian. I'm going to really mess this up. What's the point of life if to not enjoy it? What is the point of life? To not enjoy it? No, we must enjoy. And I'll never forget the way he said it. Obviously, that just butchered that.
That was great. I love it. You'd be good at improv. Yeah.
But it was
just need a tomato. Yeah.
But it's true. And so it's you've created and integrated joy into your life. Fun, play. You're bringing out the inner child. You're connecting the two.
Totally.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Totally.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
You're amazing. Okay. We're at the end, and I know that everyone's just falling in love with you. So where can they connect with you? Where do they go to get more of Neeta?
Yeah. So come on over. I hang out on Instagram. So Neeta Bhushan at Instagram.
You're going to need to spell that. I'll put it in the show notes too, but just in case.
Right. Yeah. NeetabHushan.
Perfect.
And so we've got amazing things going on our campus, and Global Grit Institute is if you wanted to come for some, business help advice. And
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Neeta, and for opening your heart and sharing the things that I'm sure, you've probably shared it more so these days than ever before.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for sharing it again on the show with us today.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, such a pleasure and so fun. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley.